Hi guys, this is One-Eyed Willie working on putting a new power steering pump. Don't know if you can see that. I'll get a light on it later. The reason I wanted to just show you this after I've got it apart is the order that you need to do to get it off without having to bust your knuckles or ruin something. So let me show you what order I'll put it back together in, and then you'll know the exact order that you need to take it apart. This is for a C4 Corvette with the LT1 engine, so that would be 92 through 96. So let me show you that, and I'll talk to you then. Okay, so the last thing you're going to have to take off is the clamp. Now the clamps are installed from the factory with it facing this way inside, and you can't get a screwdriver to it. However, if you pull the pump, you get it off of here, turn it that way, just spin it around so that this hose will turn. Then you can get a 5/16 little ratchet wrench on there, and you can take that off, and then we can spin it around so that when we put the new pump in, we can tighten it up and not have to fight with it being back in here. Okay. All right, one thing to remember, don't ever set your tools up on top of your motor. I'm kidding, I do it all the time. That's why they made it flat. That's the only reason the engineers did that. Anyway, so here is the new pump. Here's where the hose is going to hook up. I'm going to stick that in and turn it so that I can line up the this fitting here, pressure fitting for the high pressure side. And then once it's in place, then I can go ahead and tighten up the little hose clamp down there. Alright, so I've got this pushed in there about as far as it'll go. You can see here where it bolts up. There's actually only two that go into the casting, and then there's these two here that actually have a bracket that hold it in. So I'm going to finagle this and get this bad boy in here. Of course, first I believe I have to put the O-ring on it, so I'll do that and be right back. Alright, I got the O-ring in there. I don't know if you can see that. Now I'm going to shove this in there, tighten it down, uses a 5/8 wrench. Alright, so you're going to have to finagle this bad boy to get it to start, because this doesn't want to move, it's rigid. And of course the hose only flexes so much. So you're going to have to fight with it. It's not very convenient. It's almost like they don't make these to be worked on. But anyway, I'm going to finagle that until it lines up so I can tighten that nut. The O-ring's already in it, so it's just a matter of making sure it's straight, that the O-ring's flat as I push that flange against it. Alright, so I got that in. You'll have to finagle it. It should be easy. If you start cross-threading, hopefully it pops out and doesn't let you keep going. But if it gets really hard to put in, it's because you're cross-threading it and coming in at an angle. So be careful of that. It's still loose. It's still loose. It's not mounted yet. You can also see I did take off the idler, and that was so I could turn this when it was hooked to the original hose and turn it so I could get a wrench on that little hose clamp there. But you can see this hose clamp, well, you can't see with my arm in the way, but you can see that hose clamp down there. See it there? Yep. That's the one, 5/16. Now that we have the high pressure side hooked up, make sure you put your new O-ring in the bottom. Make sure you take out the old O-ring. Mine fell off, so that was good. But before you wrench this and really tighten this up, you'll want to put at least one bolt into it. When you take it off, you'll want to keep a bolt in that so that as you torque that, it doesn't strip. It doesn't round off the edges, because the whole thing will want to turn with you. So you want to keep this somewhat mounted. It doesn't have to be tight. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and tighten up. I'm going to hook this up, tighten up the hose clamp, and then we'll do the next step. Okay, so this is not tight. You'll want to put the one down here in first. See it down there? You want to get that one in first, because then if you put this one in first, just like this is the last one you take out, you can't get it turned to get the bottom one in, and that one's harder. It takes a 10mm wrench on these bad boys. There's two long ones. We're going to put the long ones in first, and then we'll put the bracket and the short bolts in. Alright, so the two long bolts are in. The one back there, the one right here. Just a word of caution, always start your bolts, I don't care what bolt it is, start it by hand so you can feel it. When it lines up, it should be easy. If it's not easy, you're not coming in straight. I got those two in. Now I'm going to tighten up this hose with the 5/8. Hold on, I got the fancy one. I got this bad boy. You will need this to take it off to begin with. See where I rounded it? That was with the standard 5/8. You'll want these bolts still in when you take that off, or loosen it at least. And you'll want these in when you tighten it up. Otherwise the whole thing will torque on you and twist. I'm also going to go ahead, tighten up that hose clamp. I know I said I was going to do it before, but until I get this in where it needs to be, making sure it's flush in the back to the casting, I didn't want to do it. I wanted to be able to kind of let it move free. The best rule is don't ever tighten anything up until everything's together. Then you can go ahead and tighten. But until then, you need to leave everything a little loose and tighten everything up at the end. But you can go ahead and tighten this in the hose clamp. But what I mean is don't tighten these two bolts until you get all these, the bracket back on and the short ones in. And yes, we're going to do the pulley last. Why would you put it on without the pulley already on? Well, because when you take this off, you have to take the pulley off so you can get to that hose. So you'll do it in the machine. I'm doing everything backwards. So that's why that pulley's not on there yet. If that was in there, then I couldn't get back to that hose anyway. Alright, so this is why you don't tighten up all your bolts. See this bracket? It goes in like this. It actually goes under that. So I've got to take that bottom one off. Yes, I don't know what I'm doing. It's actually the first time I've ever done a power steering pump. So if I can do it, you can do it. Of course, the true test will be after I'm done. Does it leak? Okay, so I got all those torqued. Because this is aluminum with a regular 3/8 ratchet, I get them where they're snug, tight, and then I do about just an eighth of a turn, not too much. I usually over torque everything, and it's easier to come back in and tighten it than it is to strip out the internal threads in your motor. That would probably be much worse. So always, when you're dealing with aluminum is not strong, especially cast aluminum. So now I'm going to put the, oh, by the way, those took 10 millimeter. There's 5 of them. See that bad boy down there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These 3 are short. This one and the bottom one are the long ones. Okay, so now I'm going to put the idler pulley back on. See if I can hold this so you can see it. So, idler pulley. I actually put that on a few months ago. It's new anyway. But if you're doing this and you haven't done the idler pulley, just change it. It's like a $6 part. And if you buy parts, I'm going to tell you that buy from Rock Auto if they have it in stock. You'll save half as much. Of course, you won't be able to get it next day. But if you plan ahead, buy everything, even stuff you may not need. You can always send it back. I always send it back, get a store credit, and they usually give me the full price back, even for returning it. Because unfortunately, when you own old cars, you're going to use it. So idler pulley, there's the bearing. Nothing glamorous. This goes down to locate on the bearing. This bolt goes in. This is a 9/16. All right, so here's the pulley. Obviously, this is the outside. It has the little lip, so you can pull it off later. This one is steel. I know some of them are plastic. That would scare me, but anyway. Got this little puller tool. All right, I already checked it before. This is the thread that goes inside in the internal diameter of the shaft on the power steering pump. So this will go in it, this will thread in. Okay, if you haven't used these before, all right, the small end is for GM, so that'll go there. Oh, that'll go there. The other one goes on the other side, and then you slide this over so it doesn't fall apart. Yes, you will probably drop it, and you'll need a little magnet tool to get it back out. Not that I've ever done that. All right, I was wrong. When you don't need the outside pieces unless you're pulling this off. I've got these just in for more space. Okay, so this doesn't bottom out. And then what I would recommend is to turn this. Make sure it's not crooked when you start pushing on it, because then it'll just seize up in a crooked state, and then you're going to need to buy a new pump. So get that straight. Make sure these are centered. They aren't. Now you can see it's got a little bit. It's out of round. Okay, but what we're going to do is hold that one with a wrench. It's a 1/2 inch. And the other one is not that. Let's look in my collection here. Nope, nope, not 7/8. I don't think it's 17 either. I believe it's 13/16 or 11/16, something weird like that. I'll be right back. Okay, so it was a 13/16. The end shaft is a 1/2. Of course, that depends on the set you get. All I'm going to do is hold this 1/2 inch still while I thread in the large nut until it gradually pushes that in all the way. Okay, so that one bottomed out, so I had to put the shorter one. You want to make sure this little guy here is threaded as deep as it can go into the shaft so you don't tear up the threads inside the shaft on the power steering pump. So I'm going to thread this in, the small end, Yep, by hand. And then I'll bring this big piece here, this flange bolt, up to it. Okay, I'm back. The pulley only went on about half the way. I don't know if you can tell in the bore how far it went. And then it basically just seized up and the entire unit would spin on me. Yes, I did use the bearing and the washer so that the flange bolt could spin freely. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to measure the bore. Please keep in mind that these are calipers. We call them verniers instead of verniers at work because they aren't very accurate, especially if your prongs are beat up like these and you really don't know if they're straight unless you have an ID ringmaster to know exactly what it's measuring. So all I'm going to do is measure this, and then I'm going to take a thou out of the bore. I'm pretty sure that these have about a 2 thou press, and if there's no way I can get it on that far, I'm really not that worried about it spinning. Worst case, you just get another pulley. But what I'm going to do first, I'll go over that next. Okay, so what I've done is I've marked up the internal diameter there with some Sharpie all the way around. I'm going to bring this down in here. I'm not going to use this. I'm going to actually bring the table up so that I can keep this on here and keep it square and perpendicular to the bore. Now, all I want to do is dust it a little bit. You would be shocked how quickly material removes. So I'm just going to take a little bit out of it all the way around until I don't see the black anymore, and we'll see how this goes. Alright, so I did the first side. You can see how rough it is. I might have taken just a little bit too much, but we're going to now flip it around. We're going to bring the table up, and then we'll dust around that side until it's cleaned up everywhere, and then I'll brush it. Okay, so I'm going to hold this, turn it on, and I'm just going to go around like this. Not hard. If you want, you can also do it this way. Okay, let's turn it off and take a look at it. You can see the middle of the bore is not cleaning up, so I'm going to bring the table up so it's a little bit deeper, see if I can get that to touch off. So the bore is pretty clean all the way around. There's one really good way to make sure you didn't screw it up, and that is fit and function, buddy. That's a FEMA term for you engineering geeks. Alright, so if I put this on, can I just push it on by hand? Still can't push it on by hand, so I didn't do it oversized. But definitely a lot easier to get started. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, I've got this high quality Harbor Freight engine brush kit, and I'm going to run these in and out of the bore to smooth up the surface finish. This would probably be fine. I don't think it would matter, but I just want it to look pretty. Alright, so I've got 3 different brushes. Obviously this one is more rigid than this one or this one. So I'm going to work my way down to the softest just to clean it out. Hopefully bump off a lot of the grinding marks and smooth it up a little bit. So I just turn this on. You can do this with a hand drill as well. And just going to run this down. Okay. I know you didn't want to see all this. I don't care. You can fast forward. Alright, so what me and the chicken are going to do now, we're going to heat up this area so it's really good and hot. That'll help expand the diameter, and we can hopefully press it on even easier. Now, do not put heat. Yeah, I'm talking to you, chicken. Don't put heat on the shaft of the pump. It will start to melt the internals, and then you'll just have a leaky pump, which is kind of the whole point we're doing this. Alright, so I'm going to heat it up, and then I'm going to quickly use this. Remember, you put the bearing here, put a washer in front on the pulley like that. I've got 2 bearings because for some reason it gets so much pressure going on that the whole assembly starts to spin, and when it does that, this internal piece, this internal piece that goes into the shaft of the pump starts to unthread itself, and you're basically going nowhere. And I don't want to try to wedge something in between the pulley and bend the pulley. So I'm going to heat this up quick. I'm going to put some gloves on because it's going to be warm. You can also just stick it in the oven. Put the pulley in the oven until it's really good and warm, and the whole thing will be hot. I'm going to try this. That way I don't have to heat up my house. Okay, got the pulley on. Already put the idler pulley on. I don't know if you can see, it basically bottoms out on the front flange like that. But what I'm going to do is put the old belt back on. I've got a new belt. I'm putting the old belt back on, and that way I just want to make sure that these are lining up. If they don't line up, because I have something wrong, it'll throw the belt, and that's bad. So I'm going to do that, and if it works okay, then I'm going to put a new belt on. Alright, so when I pulled the alternator off, obviously I unhooked the main power. Underneath the alternator is this wonderful 4-pin connector that totally broke off. So I'm going to have to cut this off. I've already got the new connector here. When you go to the parts store, you're going to figure out if anybody knows what they're talking about. I even brought the alternator in, and still people gave me blank stares. So when you find that one person who knows exactly what it is, and it is the correct one, and that's the person you go to the rest of your life. So I'm going to cut this off one at a time, splice these in, and then tape them, and then I can hook the alternator back up. Alright, so those are spliced in. Do one at a time so you don't forget which order it is on the connector. The original, instead of a brown and a black, it's just 2 blacks. So this one is use a 12 gauge when you strip it. These 2 are 16 gauge. Alright, and then you have to use a crimping tool and little tubies. And I'm going to tape it just in case something pulls out later. You never know. And then we're going to plug the alternator back in. Alright, so you'll want to put this one in first. It does not line up very good, even when you've got this end to supposedly just freely pivot it. That doesn't work. I actually had to use a little bit of a bar and kind of wiggle it until I got that started. So now that I have it started, the 13, okay, and now I can go ahead and put this one in and that one in. Okay, so these takes a T50 Torx wrench. This takes a 15 millimeter wrench. So I'm gonna go ahead and tighten those up. Connect the air back up and then install the belt. Turn it on and we'll say a little prayer before we do that. All right, so that connector's in, the ground's back in, the belt's on. To get the belt off, use a 5/8 long wrench. Hook it up there, pull it down. You may need to take another to do this to get more leverage, to loosen it up. Make sure you route it according to that routing. If you don't have it on your car because it wore off, there you go. Alright, so apparently I'm not as worried as I was because there's a lot of slop on each side of this pulley for the power steering pump. So looks like it can be off about a, I don't know, 100 thousandths and still be good. Alright, so I'm going to start it up and we will clear out the workbench first and then start it up and see if it works. Okay, belt hasn't flown off yet. Always a good sign. No lights on. Can turn it. No whining anymore. It used to whine as soon as I turned it on. Alright guys, that is the reverse way to put your power steering pump back on an LT1 Corvette. If you have any questions or if you want to insult me for my noobness, not sure if that's a word, my noobishness, go ahead, I don't care. I'm learning as I'm doing it. Have a good day. God bless.